you're here for thinking about overcoming the monster. And I guess this is the kind of spooky night, frightening night. We're thinking about things more to do with horror and night terrors. So I hope you sleep well tonight. And so on that subject, I was thinking, it's so easy, isn't it, to be in a situation where we're afraid to go to sleep in the dark. Now, my son is called Reuben. He's 6 years old. And every night when I put him to bed, he insists on two things happening. One, I have to shut his wardrobe door, and I have to make sure that the landing light outside of his room is always on. Now, I wonder, when you were younger, when you were a child, even today, whether you're a type of person who also needed to sleep with light being present. I wonder if you still are afraid of the dark. Now, it's interesting, isn't it? Because often with children, the idea of monsters under the bed is something that seems to grow up in folklore across every generation, across every culture. There is always something to be terrified wherever you are on the planet that's going to come out and get you at night. In England, I guess people might say, oh, watch out, the bogeyman will get you. In Belgium, it's known as the Boken Riders. It's the Bootsman if you're in Germany. The Sackman if you're in Spain. Baba Yaga will get you if you're in Russia. Tata Duente in Belize, or Namahaja if you're in Japan. Now, of course, as we grow up, these legends from our childhood, they kind of get put into the past, don't they? And our focus instead becomes locked on far more modern fears like exams, or relationships, or jobs. But you know, there is a genre of storytelling that believes in monsters. Not in a kind of fantasy way, but it believes that monsters are here today, that they occupy our adult world. They live unseen amongst us. And it's the horror genre. And the concept at the heart of the horror genre is very simple, and it's this. There is such a thing as evil, and it is wrapped in a personality that coexists with us. It's funny, isn't it? Even in the 21st century, when we're surrounded by our smartphones and our technology, and with a greater understanding of the scientific and natural world than at any other time in history, the horror genre still thrives. We're still drawn back to the old stories that tell us that coexisting amongst our comfort, there are evil monsters that are merely waiting for us to be alone. But you know, the horror genre actually has an even deeper fixation than that, and it's this. The horror genre says, and you can see it in all sorts of different horror movies, it says evil can inhabit, can be within and dwell within a person. See, the horror genre has a terrifying idea that the monsters aren't just out there. Actually, the most darkest, most terrifying of the horror genre, things such as The Exorcist, will have us believe that actually the monsters are within us, right in here. So much so that it's very difficult for us to tell where the monster starts and where we finish. Now, I want to introduce you, before we look at the passage that Tom has just so beautifully read, I want to introduce you to two stories. Now, they're monster stories, but they're not traditionally to do with the horror genre. And the first one is this one. It's called, it's a film, 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. Last year it won 2 Oscars and a whole host of other awards. And actually it became widely considered by critics to be one of the most remarkable films of recent times. If you've not seen it, I really encourage you to go and seek it out. And it all starts in a place called Ebbing, Missouri, a very small town, and it all focuses on a character called Mildred Hayes. And she is a mother who is grieving because only 7 months earlier, her daughter Angela was raped and murdered. And Mildred is furious. She's absolutely angry at the lack of progress over the investigation into which murderer, which monster would have done this to her daughter. And so what she does is she rents 3 billboards just outside the town. The first billboard says, "Raped while dying." The second billboard that drivers can see as they go into the town is "Still no arrests?" ? And the third billboard says, "How come, Chief Willoughby?" You see, the story focuses on Mildred, and we watch her as she goes in search of justice to find the monster that did despicable things to her own daughter. And as Mildred seeks justice, a justice that doesn't seem to be able to be found, she actually becomes more and more extreme in her behaviour. She ends up firebombing a police station. She ends up setting a light to a man who she is angry with because he seems to be frustrating the investigation. And she even ends up driving right across America to kill a man who is a nasty piece of work, but she knows with categorical proof that he is not the murderer of her daughter. And the film is this mixture of watching her with total sympathy, because your heart breaks for her, watching this mother go through this trauma, and absolute horror at what she is becoming. And there's a second story that I want to introduce you to. Again, it's not technically part of the horror genre, but you've probably heard of it. It's one of Netflix's most famous and widely watched series, and it's called Breaking Bad. It was running from 2008 to 2013, and it is considered by some critics to be one of the all-time greats of television series. It's set in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and Breaking Bad follows the story of a man called Walter White. And it begins where Walter, he was a secondary school teacher, a science teacher, a good man, a kind man, a man who loves his family and is doing everything he can for them. Working 2 jobs just to pay the bills, Walter discovers that he's got a brain tumour. And the chances are he's going to die. Because the medical costs to even attempt to begin the treatment are so astronomically high that he can't even pay even if he wanted to. And he's facing down the barrel of losing everything and unable to even provide financial security to his family. And we feel this sense of injustice for Walter. We really like him because he is this kind man who, because of the financial unbalance, injustice of where he lives, it threatens to crush him and his entire family. And initially, what he does in order to just give a chance, just give a hope, he links up with his former student, a guy called Jesse. And Walter and Jesse eventually, they begin to make crystal meth, an illegal drug, and they begin to sell very, very small batches of this stuff, and it grows to become more and more popular, and suddenly the money is coming in. And Walter, in order to manage this new industry that he's embarking on to save himself and save his family, he takes on the name Heisenberg. And because of his drug-related activities, Walt, over the series, eventually finds himself making more and more extreme decisions in order to keep the money flowing in. He ends up killing someone. He poisons a child. He frames his friends. He betrays those he loves. He develops a level of cruelty and ruthlessness of absolutely frightening levels. What do both these stories have in common? Well, they've both been absolutely acclaimed by our culture, held up to say, look, these are great stories. But what is startling is they both make one single signature point, and it's this. If there is no ultimate way to get justice in this world, you end up becoming the very monster you hope to destroy. If there's no ultimate justice in this world, you end up becoming the very monster you hope to destroy. And that is the claim of horror movies.